Hey everyone, and welcome to the final episode of Painting Faces. I am Cynics, and in this episode I'm going to be tackling this whole area in the kind of bottom left-hand side of things. I'm just kind of filling out that whole area. And you can see that before I got started, I actually kind of washed in some colors over there with some green tones and just kind of colored it up a bit. That's kind of a compositional thing, and even though this entire overall piece doesn't really have a proper composition because it lacks any kind of sense of lighting or depth or anything like that you would want, it's still I still felt like at least throwing in some compositional touches, like having the corner at least not just be a strong white and kind of bringing the side of the piece into some darker tones in the background. Just to kind of make that stuff not stick out too much because I don't want the eye being driven right off to the edge, but who knows. So anyway, for this face, the first one I'm doing is the male face right here. That's kind of a top-down view. And the idea that I wanted to capture with this particular skin tone is I was aiming to kind of replicate something a little like Phil Hale would do. If you don't know who Phil Hale is, he's a traditional painter again, and he's pretty influential, I would say, on a lot of artists these days. Notably, people like John Foster and Marko Djurdjevic are kind of very much in a Phil Hale type style, and it's pretty interesting. He has a lot of good things, especially when it comes to poses and skin tones. He does some skin tones that are very kind of like dark and a lot darker than you would expect for a skin tone, and just kind of a lot more, I don't know, they have this texture about them that I would describe as like the skin tones look slightly like a burnt rubber. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's the right way to describe it, but they have this like very strong like dark texture to them, and it's kind of interesting. But so obviously to capture that, I'm bringing in a lot of darkish red tones around the whole face, and just kind of in general trying to bring it into a much darker tone while having some lighter lighting, kind of a strong lighting sense at the top, just to kind of amplify this whole top-down lighting style. Um, but the other thing I'm doing is, since he's a traditional painter, his strokes are usually kind of visible, so I'm kind of being very mindful of the way I move the brush and the strokes I'm going for. I'm trying to always be working in a lateral kind of stroke direction across the face to describe the form with my brush strokes. So just to kind of recap that, yeah, I would say anytime you're going to keep your brush strokes visible and you're not going to blend them out or do something really airbrushy and light, I would say it's a very good idea, and even if you are going to do that stuff, but especially if you're going to see the brush strokes, it's a very good idea to be mindful of the direction that you're going to move your brush in. So always be defining the form with your brush strokes. Obviously, it's not like when you were a little kid and you wanted to color something in, you just kind of scribbled back and forth with no real direction, just kind of to fill it out with color. You don't want to be doing that when you're filling in your skin tones and stuff like that. You always want to be mindful of your directions and the way you're moving the brush around. So that will help a lot with certain things, especially when you're doing painterly things. So this face is coming along, and I would say I think it's about this time that I moved above the line art. Once again, much like most of the faces on this page, I did one layer below the line art just to kind of establish all my values and stuff. And then where the line art was getting in the way, I switched to a layer that was above the line art, and I'm just kind of going over that stuff and getting rid of any of those lines that were in my way, which is usually around the eyes and around the lines on the edges of things and stuff like that. And for this one, the ear kind of got lost in the line art, so I went back and kind of repainted that, always bringing in some saturated tones on the ear. And for the hair, I just decided to go with a really just plain black look with a small highlight in just one section. But that makes me think a bit of Phil Hale, where it's just kind of, nothing too strong in terms of highlight and tightly rendered. If the hair is like a dark tone, you're probably just gonna put a really dark tone. Maybe have a little bit of highlight, but real minimal on the highlights, and just kind of really capture those dark tones and focus on capturing your brushstrokes properly. And you can see there was a minor color correction there while I kind of cut the video and switched to the other face because I didn't want to do all of these in one sitting because I was, not that quite, I don't quite have that endurance. So I took some time out and color corrected it a little bit, and here is the second face, which is going to be this female face in the bottom left corner. And for this one, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I think I kind of realized early on that I didn't want to do anything that drew too much attention, so instead of worrying about things too much, I was just going to do some techniques to push this into the background. And I would say there's a few keys when it comes to moving stuff into the background and showing depth. Obviously, I'm focusing on showing depth compared to that female face that's to the right. Not so much the stuff that's above, such as the face I just did, or any of the other stuff. I'm kind of, with this whole composition, I'm kind of just working randomly, deciding what I want to actually kind of make work with each other. But so for this one, obviously to show depth, I am both limiting the range of hue variation, I'm limiting the range of contrast, and I'm also just kind of pushing everything back into the atmosphere, or in this case, back into the kind of trying to make it more sync with the background color, which is kind of a greenish tone. So everything's slightly more darker and greenish, and everything doesn't have strong value changes or strong hue changes. So those are the key things that you want to do when you're pushing something into the background. Less color changes, or less strong color changes, less strong value changes, just kind of less noticeable stuff. And that's what kind of will push something into the background. So I'm just kind of working with these minimal tones, kind of making subtle little changes to my colors, maybe a little bit of orange here, kind of having it look like the light's coming somewhere from the back, like I already kind of established some lighting from behind and off to the side, so you can see there's some lighter tones there. So I figured it would kind of match well with the background and everything if I kind of went with those lighting. So the darkest part is on the front of the face and in the top. And I didn't want to do anything too strong with the hair or anything like that. So I'm just kind of working now here, trying to see if there's any way I could bring in anything more interesting. I experimented with bringing in some stronger bounce light on like that jawbone. But I think in the end I decided not to go with anything too crazy. Just because, I didn't want it to take away from anything. So once again, working above the line art to take away, I'm sorry, to add to the ear, since the ear was kind of muddled by the line art. That especially happens a lot when you're doing these small little tiny faces, because these faces weren't very big. This working size, you can tell, is actually the size it was working at. It's not like blown up and then shrunk down for video purposes. This is like the actual size you're seeing if you're viewing this at the resolution 856 by 480, I think, is the recorded resolution. So that's all I had to work with. So you can see it's pretty tiny, and I'm just kind of making little tiny changes and trying to show what I wanted to show with the line art versus the actual painting color scheme. So I think that's about it for this one. I also went in and did some color scheme changes. I don't think I did too much. I did some graphical stuff around the edge in between this one and the next one, but that's about it. And you'll see that right there. So for this final piece, this face up here, this was actually a face I struggled with forever. There's a lot of recording time that I scrapped because I was trying different things. Everything I tried, it was either making this face too much in focus or too much into the background, and it was just really distracting. And I guess that's kind of the weaknesses of not having a complete composition, is when you start doing certain things, like it just really bugs you and it looks bad. And since this whole thing had no complete composition, normally I wouldn't care. I could just render him out like he was, independent of everything else, but this time it just wasn't working for me. So I kind of tried different things, trying to trying to make a dark shadow on the front, trying to do highlight on the top, and eventually, like after like 30 minutes of recording, like all I could do was just write FUC, and luckily I ran out of space. But I just decided to leave it like that because, I didn't think anything good was gonna come of this face. Like there was nothing productive coming out, and so whatever, just forget it. There's obviously no rules when it comes to art and stuff like that, and sometimes you just gotta let your whatever emotion you're feeling towards something come out, and you'll have that graphical stuff. So here I am checking my values carefully on my lettering. No. But yeah, at this point I was like, yeah, whatever, like nothing's gonna look good over there, so I think I'll just wrap this up, and it's kind of not the best face anyway, so some of that stuff comes out. But I think that's about it. I don't really do anything else with this face, so um, yeah. Now that I've finished this series on painting faces, I'll take a moment to look back and maybe recap some of the stuff I've talked about in previous videos. I would say if there is one thing I would hope people would take away from all these videos, it would be the importance of diversifying your colors on your skin tones, both from a vertical standpoint and even a lateral standpoint. But it's always fun to experiment a lot with different colors. The worst thing you could do is basically keep your skin tones monochromatic and looking dull and lifeless. Don't be afraid, even if you're doing something simple like a cel-shaded or just a simple kind of flat painting, to throw in some colors on different areas, experiment around a bit, just kind of have fun with it. Don't approach it like it's something static that should always be done the same way every time. As you can see, if you look at all these faces, there's a lot of diversity in how they're rendered and the colors used on each one, stuff like that. But on that hand, while you're also experimenting with all your colors and mixing things and getting some greens and blues and reds and oranges, you should always make sure that your values work regardless of that. So we can see, you check my values here in the black and white. And obviously it works for the most part. I don't see any major problems, even though there's tons of color variations in some of these faces. You turn them on black and white and they look like they make sense. The shadows are where you want the shadows, the highlights are where you want the highlights, and everything's defining the form of the face. So, there you go. I guess those are the two main things. Yeah, just have fun and explore your color sense and different lighting schemes and all that good stuff. So, I hope you enjoyed this series of videos. I actually already have a ton of ideas for future videos, some for one-off videos and some for series, like this one, a series of videos. So, there shouldn't be too much of a delay before I get back to you guys with all kinds of fun new things. Sometimes they'll be about hands-on drawing stuff, and others might just be about art and artists and stuff like that. So it should be fun, and I hope you guys look forward to that stuff, and make sure to subscribe, and you can talk to me on Twitter and stuff like that, because I'm always twatting it up. So I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching.